everyone. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. I think people are going to be rolling in. So if you would like to post a greeting in the chat, let us know where you're joining from today. That would be wonderful. And just before we get started, as people are rolling in, I just want to cover a few housekeeping items. So this meeting is being recorded. And closed caption has also been enabled. If you would like to turn that on, you can go to navigate to more at the bottom of your Zoom window, and you should see the option for closed caption there. Also, just to let you know that everyone has been muted upon entry to help us control our background noise, but we're going to have the chat going, so make sure you can view the chat and feel free to post questions as they arise in the chat. We'll be monitoring the chat and also stopping periodically to take questions. And we'll also have a Q&A at the end of our session. So as we get started, just a reminder that we are posting a code of conduct in the chat, and this is just guidelines to remind everyone that we gather today in a collegial space that is respectful of our varying and diverse perspectives. And as we get started, I also want to give you the opportunity to get some pencil and paper so that you can have that on hand. We're going to be doing some sketching activities. And there is also a link to the lesson plan posted in the chat. So please feel free to access that. Make sure that you can access that. We have an incredible lesson plan today, and want to be sure that you have that resource if you'd like to follow through the steps of the lesson plan as we go through our presentation. All right, so I guess we can officially begin again. And thank you everyone for joining. Let's see, just take a quick look. I see a lot of ambassadors. Oh, great, there's Dina, hello. Many ambassadors joining us. What a nice turnout. All right, so I'd like to officially introduce myself and the team. And I'm Toni Guglielmo, Director of ARTEFFECT. And I'm on the call today with my teammates that I would like to introduce and have them say a quick hello. So first, Sarah Hoffrick, who is Managing Director of Programs and Partnerships with the Lowell Milken Family Foundation.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Hoffrecht. As Toni mentioned, I'm Managing Director of Programs and Partnerships at the Lowell Milken Family Foundation. And I'm so thrilled that we have so many people joining us today to hear from Brad LeDuc go through this wonderful lesson plan on storytelling through art. Looking forward to hearing everyone's thoughts and experiences of this lesson plan. And once again, welcome.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Our next team member is Michael Kay, Digital Media Editor with the Lowell Milken Family Foundation.
Hi, everyone. Thanks again for being here. Yeah, I'm also looking forward to Brad's lesson plan and presentation.
Great, and Katie Ward is joining us as Program Assistant with Lowell Milken Family Foundation.
Hello, everyone. I'm thrilled that you're all here, and I'm excited to be learning in community with you and having Brad as our facilitator.
Great, thank you. And also I want to acknowledge our tech support, Peter behind the scenes, and I'd also like to welcome again all of our ARTEFFECT ambassadors that are joining the session. So delighted that you are here today. I want to welcome all returning educators that have been on our previous online learning sessions, and especially to welcome all new educators joining ARTEFFECT for the first time. So I know that you have been hearing the term Unsung Heroes. And in this context, I just wanted to start off with a definition of unsung heroes and what we mean by an unsung hero in our learning circle. So unsung heroes are individuals that have been largely unrecognized by society for their contributions that they took in terms of extraordinary actions that had a positive and profound impact on the lives of others in service to society and that changed the course of history. And these are inspiring stories that demonstrate the power of one person to make a difference and to create positive change in the lives of others. Within the context of ARTEFFECT, we are examining these stories, and on the next slide, I can just share kind of an overview of the mission with you. In the context of ARTEFFECT, we come together as educators and students to explore these stories from history of diverse individuals from all different times in history and all different disciplines, and to really learn from their actions and their traits, and to explore them as role models through the visual arts. And the way that ARTEFFECT does this, we have various sort of programs within the initiative. ARTEFFECT includes an annual competition, and I'll be talking about that a little bit later in our program. We also have exhibitions of student artworks as well as professional development. So obviously today we're gathered in our professional development session, and I wanted to just quickly mention that this is one of a series of webinars that we're running as part of the professional development. And we also have, as you heard me mention, our ambassadors. Our ambassadors are a pilot program for professional development that we've started this year. We have 28 amazing educators from around the nation and Canada that are working in depth with our curriculum and bringing this curriculum back into their classrooms and communities. So on the next slide, I wanted to just give you a little bit of geographic context. So here you're seeing the Lowell Milken Center for Unsung Heroes, which I know some of you are already familiar with. So that's sort of a headquarters in Fort Scott, Kansas. And the center recently celebrated its 15th year anniversary. At the center, there's activities where teachers and students can engage in project-based learning to discover the stories of the unsung heroes. And there's a Discovery Award program that goes with that. And then there's also opportunities for students to exhibit their artworks at the center, and they also have a fellowship program for educators that are interested in this, exploring unsung heroes and discovering those stories. And the other image on your screen is the Milken Center for Advancing the American Dream, which is a new center that is currently under development and opening in winter of 2024 in Washington, D.C. And I'm excited to share with you that ARTEFFECT will be having an exhibition focused on the student artworks within the new MCAD, Milken Center for Advancing the American Dream facility. And so this is a really exciting opportunity for your students that are participating in the ARTEFFECT competition, and in that program to be able to have potentially an exhibition of their artwork in DC. So just on the next slide, I just wanted to recap then for those of you that are new, the kind of overarching goals of how we're gathering together today. So first, we gather together with this goal in ARTEFFECT of professional development. And this is, you know, this opportunity for all of us as a community of learners to deepen our instructional practice and to bring our experience and skills together for peer learning and peer sharing, and to really develop new ways of studying and learning about the unsung heroes through the visual arts. And our second goal is to strengthen student learning to amplify the voice of students through the visual arts. And I know all of you are already dedicated and passionate about that as art educators. And the third goal is to inspire others through these stories of the unsung heroes. I put the quote up there from our founder, Mr. Lowell Milken, that one individual has the power to make a positive and profound difference in the lives of others. So this this is really our founder's guiding vision that, it's that power of one person to make a difference. And that is speaking obviously to the unsung heroes, but it speaks to all of us as educators, and it speaks to our students who are discovering their own power and potential through the artworks that they create. So I want to just take a moment to acknowledge and thank the Lowell Milken Family Foundation for this opportunity to provide these resources for us today, to work with this material, and to come together, and for all of the innovations that we will create together in education. So on the next slide, I want to transition now to our program for today, and it's my pleasure to introduce our topic, which is storytelling through art. I know we have many people on the call today because this is such a powerful topic, and we all intuitively kind of understand the power of storytelling. Hearing powerful and emotionally compelling stories makes us more empathetic and generous. And there's actually a growing body of research that hearing stories shapes our brains, and it's called neurocoupling, which means that, so interesting, it means that there's sort of a brainwave connection between the person that tells the story and the person that's hearing the story, or watching a movie, or viewing a work of art. So this neurocoupling creates a space for us to become more generous, more empathetic, kind of open in terms of our feelings and emotions. And within that space, we know we can use that for inspiration, for finding new ways to engage with others, or to be motivated to take positive actions. So this is a purely inspirational opportunity that we're exploring for our students in teaching them the skill of visual storytelling. And we have actually no one better to take us through this topic than Mr. Brad LeDuc. Brad is an educator with more than 20 years of teaching in the classroom. He currently teaches at Washburn Rural High School in Topeka, Kansas. He has been engaged with ARTEFFECT since its inception in 2016. And he has been instrumental over the years in its development. He has won numerous awards for his work, including a Milken Educator Award in 2013. In 2014, he was a fellow at the Lowell Milken Center for Unsung Heroes in Kansas. He's also been recognized by the Kansas Art Education Association as Art Educator of the Year. He's an artist as well, and he brings his creativity to his teaching. Brad is going to share more about his background, but I just want to say that he is one of the most creative and thoughtful educators I know, and it's an honor to have him guide us through this topic today. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Brad.
All right. Wow. Thanks, Tony. I appreciate the welcome there. I want to thank Tony and the ARTEFFECT crew for the opportunity to be here tonight. And just want to especially thank all of you that are here tonight as far as educators. I know it's one of the busiest times of the year with finals weeks and Scholastic and just a million things on our plate. So I really appreciate you taking an hour out of your evening to be here. So as Tony said, this is my 23rd year in the classroom, and I began my career as a K-12 art educator in a small rural community here in Kansas, and then currently teach at Washburn Rural High School, which is one of the largest schools in the state. Next. So we'll kick off the session today with some examples of various Unsung Hero projects that I've incorporated into my classroom over the last 10 years. And we'll go through a few slides, and I'll kind of share some visuals as far as kind of what that's looked like. And then exploring the art of storytelling, we'll spend a few minutes reflecting on our preconceived ideas about storytelling. I know I had a lot kind of coming into creating this lesson plan. We'll then do an interactive activity over scanning and describing, where we will practice our ability to listen and translate a work of art. Then we'll transition into introducing the date model. I'm excited about this tool for your students. Helps them feel more comfortable interacting with new works of art. And then in step 5, we'll take a look at a graphic called the Unsung Heroes Journey. I think this will be something that'll help you understand and break down the key components to a story while looking at the Unsung Heroes stories. Followed by an ideation activity where we generate multiple ideas quickly. and then we'll sprinkle in a few extension activities toward the end as we wrap up the lesson. And we'll follow it up with some Q&A, so hopefully we can fit it all in. Next. So at the beginning of each school year, students in my advanced art class, we begin the semester by honoring one person in our building as an unsung hero. And we do this by creating a large 7 by 9 foot portrait in the style of artist Chuck Close. This is a collaborative project where students work together in groups of 5 to 10 to build community in the classroom, and then building community within our building as well, using their gifts to love on others. Next. We've done this for several years. I started teaching in 2001, and since 2001, I think I've done over 20 of these with students, and I'm just going to show you a couple of examples of these. Next. And they have a short turnaround when we do these. I always start these off in our AP class, and we have about 2 to 3 weeks to do this. Students collectively work together. They have to find their topic and agree on a topic, photograph them, and then draw them. And in our building, we have around 2,000 people, so they can really choose from any of those people. Over the years, we've selected teachers, administrators, custodians, students, and each with their own unique story and how they've impacted our school community in a positive way. Peter, if you can flip back to a couple slides. One more, yeah, that one there. So this is Joe Simons. The next slide, I'm sorry. And this one was completed in 2020 during COVID. And this is the only one that really kind of stands out. I mean, the actual image kind of tells its own story, but it's the only one where we didn't actually fit it together while they were working on it. So there wasn't really a time for critique because we were broken down into A and B groups. And so it kind of has that, it's kind of disjointed a little bit because of that. But the process, again, really kind of connects back to the circumstances at the time. During the creation, though, of the portrait, students invite their unsung hero back in to sit down and interview. So they have to create their own list of questions that they've prepared to unearth the topic's heroic traits, which are used to write an essay. And then they write that essay, and then during the presentation of these portraits, they will read that to the hero, and then we unveil the portrait. And then that'll hang up in our building for a year. During the creation of the portrait, students invite their unsung hero back in, and I'm sorry, wrong slide there. So if you want to go to the next slide, next one, Peter. One more. There we go. During the infancy of the ARTEFFECT program, our AP class here at Washburn Rural had the opportunity to pilot the program back in the fall of 2014. And that was a pretty amazing experience for our students. And, the LMC was generous enough during that time to even give us a cash prize for the student that won the pilot. And so I had a classroom full of 20 students, and they were pretty jazzed. I mean, it felt like a real competition. And so we rolled that out just to kind of see what it would look like in a classroom setting. And it really gave me as an educator, my students, kind of the first taste of incorporating these stories in the classroom. The image on there is by Emily Smith, and Emily was the student that actually won the pilot competition, and she did her work over Helen Tossig. Next. During those years, like 2014 to 2016, we had a lot going on kind of in our classroom at that time. During the same time of integrating the pilot project, one of the 20 students that was in the pilot discovered a story about a woman named Alice Seeley Harris, who was an English missionary and an early photographer whose work helped document and expose the human rights abuses in the Congo at the time. And so I had a group of 4 students, Lexi Balan, who created the image there on the right. She was one of the 4. And we did a collab with a local friend named Josiah Engstrom, who ran a film company here in Topeka, and he mentored them. And I mean, he would come in weekly and kind of show them how to use tools. And they created a documentary called Kodak in the Congo. And so Alice Seeley Harris has become, one of the unsung heroes that students can create works over. It's an amazing story, amazing documentary. If you have time to watch that, again, Kodak in the Congo. Same time period kind of going on. The kids are doing these projects, and while this was happening as an artist, I was collaborating with a good friend and former Milken educator named Michael Barrett, and he had written a book called The Hero Within, and he needed an illustrator. And so once him and I befriended each other and he realized or knew I was an artist, he invited me to do the illustrations for that, in which I did. And so this book was written and published, and this is a resource that elementary teachers, I'm sorry, can read to their classes, and it introduces the concept of an unsung hero story and gives them an opportunity to get started on that. Next slide. And then the year after, I'd been working on my master's as a teacher for probably 6 or 7 years, and in 2016 I finished that. And so for my kind of master's cornerstone exhibition, it was titled Unearth Discovering Heroes in the Classroom, and it included the unsung hero portraits that we continue to do here at the high school. It had the images from the pilot competition. It had the original illustrations from the children's book. And so I just wanted to kind of briefly introduce that, excuse me, kind of give you a background on kind of my involvement with those unsung hero stories. And it's been an incredible journey. It really has, being able to incorporate those on different levels. All right, next. So we're going to go ahead and transition into the lesson plan. So this is storytelling through art. And during the course of working on this lesson plan, one realization that I had that there's really no right or wrong way to tell a story, much like there's really no right or wrong way to interpret a work of art. So there are two different lenses to consider when talking about storytelling. Stories are first told through the lens of the artist who's creating the work, and then the real storytellers are actually the people and the viewers who look at the work. And they come to that with different experiences and a unique lens, and really, how they interpret the story. They're a storyteller. They really are. So the lesson is designed to be presented in 4 consecutive 50-minute periods. And, that can be very adaptable, depending on your situation, if you teach on a block or maybe even have a shorter period. After the 4th step on the lesson plan, I would definitely recommend, though, taking a little bit of time to let your students kind of interact with some of those unsung hero stories and kind of figure out, who it is that they connect to. And there's some absolutely amazing stories. I mean, amazing stories that, your students will have never heard about, and they'll be able to connect with those and have an impact on them. But that connection component is instrumental, I think, on the success of the project. Next. So I love this quote by artist Bo Bartlett. It says, "A good piece of art is really a good open-ended question." Love this quote. But Bo Bartlett's one of the greatest contemporary American painters of our time in terms of storytelling. I encourage you to take the time to watch that video of him talking about his work that was included in the pre-reading, if you haven't already done so. And now, although there is no easy way to create a great work of art that tells a story, as a teacher, I feel like we can help students break down the complexity, into manageable steps. I feel like that's kind of our job, our duty, is to help students kind of navigate through that. So ultimately, as teachers, our hope is to help our students use their artistic voice to tell their story with clarity, yet in a way that leaves, a little bit of mystery too, I think, much like the open-ended question. Next slide. So to begin the lesson, I like the idea of engaging students in a conversation about what storytelling is. You can ask students to reflect on the following questions in their sketchbooks, followed by a class discussion. Storytellers have an innate ability to see kind of what's going on around them and then being able to translate into what they see and they feel. And so today in today's lesson, we'll become storytellers and practice seeing, sharing, and then interpreting. So what are your thoughts on the first question? And I'm going to let you just kind of type your responses and excuse me, in the chat, and then I'll let Tony read some of those if that's okay. But that first question, do all works of art tell stories? Why or why not? I'll give you a moment. when I was prepping for the presentation and kind of writing the lesson plan, a week or two, we had this conversation in my AP class, and they had some really, really good thoughts on this. So again, do all works of art tell stories? Why or why not?
All right, well, we're getting some responses. So Debbie is saying that yes, because it's the viewer who interprets the story, which I really like, and you and I talked about that a little bit, Brad. Megan is saying yes, even if it's not a narrative composition, you are getting the artist's story through their unique perspective of the world and like what they're bringing to the artwork. And then I think I saw one from Dina. Dina said yes. I think everyone is saying yes. All works of art tell a story, give a glimpse into the artist's mind. Thank you, Dave. And Jana is saying yes to some degree, explicitly or implicitly.
Like that.
All right.
All right, we'll take a quick second, I'm sorry, on that next question, but what are the components necessary to tell a story? You guys want to plug in a few of those? What are the components necessary to tell a story? And my thought on this question was putting together the lesson plan. I feel like these were some of the questions I feel like I had to kind of research or find answers to. So I think it's good for the students to have to think through that before you kind of get into things.
Okay, we're getting some responses to this question. What are the components necessary to tell a story? We have emotion from Sandra. Ms. Lewis says the 5 W's: who, what, when, where, why, and how. And 5 W's plus an H. Melvin says not all work is intended to tell a story. Okay, that was maybe a previous question. It needs a subject, a point of view. I agree with that point of view, and a mode of narration. Alice says a medium, words, images, or music. Sue, I think one key component to storytelling is that a story has to move the receiver emotionally in some way. Dave, a lived experience. Debbie, to tell a story, you need a listener and a storyteller. And then it's up to the two to write in here.
I really like that thought of to be a storyteller, you need a storyteller and a listener. That's really, really important. And one of our last steps is critiquing work, which is just really, really important because of that. Again, our students are storytellers through their art, and so we do want them to have the opportunity to tell those stories not only visually but with their voice too.
Yep, and we're getting some other responses: a beginning, a middle, and an end, a message, a connection to the audience that you were just saying, Brad, subject, setting, experience, motivation, point of view.
That's good. All right, so that conversation can look different in different ways. It could be in their sketchbooks, depending on how active or big your class is. I like to have a conversation or pair and share. Lots of different ways to do that. All right, next slide. So we're going to do another drawing activity here, and you're going to need a piece of paper. And I have the wrong slide up here real quick. Hold on one second. I'm sorry. So what we're going to do is this is an activity that I love to do with students. And basically what I do is I take them and I partner them up. And so if like Tony and I were partners in the classroom, one of us would be sitting facing a monitor or facing your projector screen. The other student would be facing away. And the student that's facing away, that's facing their partner, is going to have their back to the screen and they're going to have a piece of paper. And then I like to project an image on the screen and then give the student who is facing the screen, partnered up, anywhere from like 5 to 10 minutes to describe, just using their words, kind of what they see on the screen. And they try to do this in a very, very objective way. I have a good friend in town who runs an art gallery named Stephen Smith, and he told me this story just last week, and this is a story I'll probably retell on this activity in the future, but he said that he had a collector come in who was blind. He had lost his sight later in life, but just a huge art lover, and he wanted to buy some artwork. And so he was interested in an artist, and Stephen had 2 of that artist's paintings. And so he had to describe them to somebody who was blind so that he could decide which painting he wanted to purchase. So that's kind of how that looks when you do this activity. So next slide. So we're going to give this a go, and I'm going to actually be the person describing this, but Peter's going to put on some music, and I'm going to take about 5 minutes here, and I'm going to describe a work of art to you by just using my words. And while I'm describing it, I'm going to let you draw it. And then at the end of the 5 minutes, we'll put that up on the screen and you'll get to see it. So hopefully everybody has their paper and their pencil or pen ready. So this artwork is vertical. So you can kind of format your image that direction. Again, it's a vertical image. I'm going to tell you a little bit real quickly what it is, and I'm going to tell you where things are located. But there's a figure in this kind of front and center looking out at the viewer, and they're holding a tree in their left hand, which is the right side of the image when you look at it. And this tree has been uprooted, and it looks like a full-grown tree, but it's about half the size of the person, and the top of it is flaming, and the bottom half is kind of almost like dripping oil. I'm going to let you go ahead and kind of start sketching here. The horizon line on this piece is maybe about 1/5 of the distance from the bottom, so it has a really low horizon line. And the figure has a oversized shirt on, and that oversized shirt goes down to their knees, and their knees are located right on the horizon line with 2 skinny little feet and legs that come out with striped socks on. As the person is sitting there looking, they're looking at us with kind of straightforward, and in the background on the horizon line on the lower left-hand corner, there's a tiny little house that sits on the horizon line, and it's a 3-story house, and there's 2 sets of windows on the first floor and the second floor, and then a tiny little attic window. Right next to that house is a little tiny ellipse shadow that looks like that's where the tree had gotten pulled out of. And so back to the figure, they have a stocking hat on. Their head looks too small for their body. And again, their arm is holding out, gripping the tree trunk of a tree. And the tree is somewhat symmetrical in the sense of the roots and the branches that come up above it. And again, the top of the tree is on fire, and the flames are creating clouds that kind of underlap, go behind the head of the figure in the painting. All right. I'm going to let you kind of draw for maybe another minute or two, and then we'll show you this image. So in a classroom, if this activity was happening, if you had 24 students, you would have 12 groups, and it would be pretty chatty. There'd be a lot of conversations happening. And if it was one-on-one, if like Tony and I were working together, she could ask me questions too, and we would be having a conversation about it too. So what was our time on that, Tony? Is that close?
Yeah, that's just
good?
right on.
All right, so we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. And we'll show you the image. So, all right. And it's always kind of fun in a classroom setting when you show the image and there's just a lot of gasps because, that either, that might have been kind of what they were seeing or not. But it's like magic, I think, as far as them being able to remember an image and then being able to realize and look at the details. It's just a great activity to get and to teach students how to see. All right. So this piece, kind of after you look at these, you can introduce a little bit about the artist. You can ask them questions. This is Graham Francois, an artist and illustrator based out of Seattle, Washington. He works primarily with watercolor and gouache, and his work explores the connection and lack of connection between humans and the natural world. But I like he has a whole series of these called like morning coffee drawings. I mean, hundreds of these, and a lot of them tell stories. I mean, it would be a great opportunity to use those. All right. Next slide. So these are a set of questions that can be used to assist your students in breaking down the piece visually, kind of after they do that describe activity. And let's focus in on the first one. Well, feel free to leave your response with the question. But what visual elements in the image help to communicate a story here, do you think? We'll just kind of use this first question, but what visual elements in the image help to communicate a story? Give you a second on that. Now, these questions that I put into the lesson plan, these could very easily be swapped out for like traditional visual thinking strategy questions if that's something that you do with your students. So, you could replace those with, what's going on here? What do you see that makes you say that? What more can we find? Again, if you're a visual thinking strategy teacher, if you use those. So what visual elements in the image help to communicate a story on that?
All right, Brad, so we're getting a couple of answers coming in through the chat. We have the house, the tree on fire, and the person looking away as if he doesn't notice. That's from Leslie. Melissa says the house, the person, and the tree. The expression on the person's face from Kayla. Emmy, the scale of the figure, the house, the tree, and whole help us think about a sequence of events and a distance, the oil dripping. And Debbie's also asking if you might want everyone to share their drawing and just see how surprising it was versus what you were describing. And Terry, hello, Terry says a human relating to nature. Melvin, the way the character is using the tree, the person, the house, the expression, and the juxtaposition.
Yeah, that'd be great if everybody could just hold your drawing up for a bit. Awesome, man. I think there's a lot of things that could segue from this too.
That's awesome, Debbie. Wow.
That's cool.
All right, Melissa's right on. Right.
All right.
All right, thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thanks. So then after you do that, you can just have your students flip-flop and then go through that activity again. So this activity lets two storytellers work their magic at the same time, the person describing, the person drawing. They're both kind of telling stories. So this step in the lesson plan can be modeled using your choice of narrative works of art. Ideally, the more passionate you are as a teacher about the imagery that you're showing, the better. and if you have a personal story to share, I know I can get a lot more excited when I'm telling stories telling stories about artists that I'm really passionate about. All right, so we're going to show you a resource at this point. And so the lesson plan has several different resources that you can click on and then pull from. For step 2 here, the blue slide on there is just for you as a teacher. It kind of helps lay out that step. And I've got that Bo Bartlett quote on there. And then there's probably 7 or 8 different works of art. So the next slide is an image by Bo Bartlett. Elizabeth Layton, she's probably one of my all-time favorite artists. She was a Kansas native that would tell stories. And so just some great resources there for you to look at. The last artist on there, if you're not familiar with her and her work, Julie Green, she's definitely like one of my top 5 most favorite contemporary artists, where she creates images on plates. She's done over 1,000 of these, and they're all paintings of last meals that were requested by inmates before they were executed. And there's a link to her video where she explains that work. Really, really powerful. But as far as storytelling and just creative ways to do that, there's so many different ways to tell a story, beyond just a portrait. And I think that's one of our things I think we hope to have it as a takeaway from this session. Then the next slide is another example by the artist that we just looked at. And then Yi Wen is the last artist, another one that's just an amazing storyteller. We lived in Nashville for a few years, and he was an artist that showed at a gallery there. All right. So in step 3, we'll kind of transition. The teacher will use the date model slideshow resource to introduce students to the date model and then examine visual narratives. Students will interact with a variety of ARTEFFECT award-winning student works and then practice how to interpret works of art. And so from my experience with working with students, I think there's definitely an art to, looking at work, or there's an art to like going to a museum and seeing work. And I think that's probably where and why a lot of people don't go to museums sometimes, because they don't know, how to interact with their work once they're there. So this is a tool that enables students to feel comfortable and confident when interacting with a work of art. So next. So this is a resource that you can kind of print off and use in your classroom. And so how to impress a date at the art museum. Once the students are familiar with this, I don't think they ever forget it. And what I love about this model is that you can be on a date and literally be using this, and your date would have no clue that you're actually doing it. But so how to impress a date at the art museum. So D, describe, objectively what you see, which is what we just did in that last activity. A, analyze how the elements and principles are used in an artwork. T, translate the meaning or the narrative, the components of the work. And that's probably my favorite step. And that's, again, the T is where you as the viewer become the storyteller. That's when you translate what you're seeing and experiencing. And then E, evaluating the artwork, whether or not it's successful and kind of why. So, all right. Have students fill this out and as they're looking at the artwork. So we're going to show you another real quick resource. So this is a slideshow that's ready to go. You can click on that link, and then this has a number of winning works in the ARTEFFECT program over the years. And again, we try to curate kind of a selection that is kind of beyond, the typical front and center portrait looking back out, which is fine. But I think there's just so many creative ways to tell a person's story beyond just a portrait. Some amazing work here. That piece there at the end of the candy bomber. The next slide up. They use gum. That's created using materials. I like that AP thought as far as how there can be a synthesis between your ideas and materials and processes and ideas. Okay, next slide. So on this one, We're going to do a quick activity. I'd like to have a few volunteers on this one, if some of you would be up to this. And we're going to go back out to the regular slide deck. Peter, I'm sorry. And kudos to Peter. We've got a lot of moving parts in here, and he's amazing. All right, so this is we'll go ahead and next slide, and then the slide after that, Peter. Yeah, here we go. So this is one of the winning works from the past at the ARTEFFECT program. Phenomenal kind of mixed media work here, acrylic, pencil, and pen by a student who was only in 7th grade. Like, just kind of blows my mind. But this is, the title of this is An Unfamed Spy. This was entered last year. So if you would be willing, we're going to, this is going to be quick, but you're going to have like 30 seconds, 30 to 40 seconds each to, we'd like one person to describe, one to analyze, one to translate, one to evaluate. So if you'd be willing to describe this piece in around 30 to 40 seconds, if you could just put a D in the chat, and Tony will select somebody kind of randomly.
Oh, sure. So let's see. If you'd like to just do a quick description of this artwork, go ahead and unmute yourself and jump right in and give us a 30-second description of what you're seeing. I hear someone unmuted. Who is that?
We have Leslie Sullivan.
Okay, Leslie.
There you go.
Someone has to go. So I guess my description would be, it looks like some sort of a room that's an office. There's a desk and a chair and something on top of the desk that looks like some kind of machine. There's a swastika on the wall, and coming off of where that is, there seems to be a dark shadow. In the corner, there's a hat rack and an umbrella. And then there's a woman with a red dress and red shoes that is going out the door. I guess that's my fast description.
That was amazing. And that was perfect. A lot of times I know when students will describe, they start getting kind of opinionated. They want to real quickly transition down into the translate. That was perfect, Leslie. Wow. And you said some things I haven't even noticed in that piece before. All right. If you want to drop an A in the chat, if you're willing to analyze. And analyze is where we're going to kind of focus in on just, again, like the elements and principles, just how they're, maybe it's compositional type things, kind of breaking down just the artist's thoughts behind how they created it.
All right, so go ahead and unmute yourself if you want to analyze the elements and principles used in the artwork.
I'll give it a go here.
Yeah.
So there's a repetition of diagonals and alternation of white, black, white, black, white. And then there's also checkerboard design on the upward diagonal. So there's two directions of diagonals, alternation and repetition.
That was beautiful. Wow. Perfect. We'll do one more. I think we'll do the translate and then we'll transition. So if anybody willing to put a T in the chat, or if anybody would like to unmute and take 30 seconds to translate the piece. And again, no right or wrong translation. This is just your story that you're telling from the work.
Dave.
Thanks,
Dave, let's hear from you.
All right, so it looks like there's a wartime sense of urgency. I'm guessing the machine on the desk is some. This woman fleeing the door has decoded a message. The long shadows say that it's been a long day. The sun is setting, time is of the essence, and she doesn't even have time to grab her umbrella.
Wow, you guys must be art teachers. That's amazing. Okay. And then this could get extended. Thanks, Dave. This could get extended into, talking about the hero. We're not going to have that much time to do that tonight, but a great introduction just to get students talking. And then again, a great toolkit that they can take with them next time they go to the museum. All right, next slide. All right, so students then choose their unsung hero in step 4. There are currently 140 unsung heroes to choose from and counting from all walks of life and all areas of interest. So the hero must be an individual that's on the approved list from the LMC for Unsung Heroes. This is a really crucial step again in the lesson plan, in a moment where you might pause for a day or two and let the students interact with the stories before they make that choice, just trying to make that, that connection that they feel attached to. This connection creates the driving force for the project. Okay, next slide. Step 5 introduces the Unsung Heroes journey diagram, which includes the 6 key components to help them deconstruct their story. So after selecting their LMC Unsung Hero, students can acclimate themselves to that story by using this to kind of break it down. When I was putting together the lesson plan, and I've done several Unsung Hero projects with students, for me this is the most important maybe resource that it has been created, at least from my view, because I think it helped me at least kind of understand what the kids are trying to search for, and every Unsung Hero story is going to have these key components, the character, like who they are. They'll have that figured out in step 4. What's the problem? What did they observe as far as, and to me, that's what the Unsung Hero stories are all about. Like they notice a problem, and then they have that choice of either, hey, I'm gonna step in and try to fix that problem or do something that's going to help people, or I'm just going to look the other way. So what is that problem? And then on to the key 3, which is the heroic actions. How did they solve the problem? What did those actions look like? And that's a really good, I think, lead in. Once they determine what those actions look, or what those actions are, then what do those actions look like? And then sacrifice, what did they sacrifice for others? I think that's a big ingredient for an unsung hero is sacrifice. What was it that they sacrificed? Was it their time? Was it their sometimes in some cases it was their life? Key 5, impact. What impact did their actions have on others? Kind of reflecting on that. And then finally up to the heroic traits. Just what were the traits that that they were that defined them as a hero? And so that kind of becomes the recipe where they can start to deconstruct the unsung hero story and then kind of reconstruct their ideas from that. Next slide is another resource, and this is one that you can print off, and it's basically that graphic just broken down into a worksheet to where they can go through as they're learning about their unsung hero and fill this out. And next slide. So in visual storytelling, students will want to be intentional about using, image to communicate. I think that's pretty straightforward, but what is it they want to share? And so they can break down that worksheet and try to kind of start thinking about what that might look like. What part of their story is a must include? How can you use these musts to coexist in a singular work of art? And this assignment, this project, this competition is not easy, but the rewards are huge, I think. So in step 6, students will plan out their artworks using information from their Unsung Hero Journey worksheet in the form of thumbnail sketches. So next slide. So this is a resource that you can print off and hand out. You can hand out copies of this thumbnail sketch worksheet and then visit with students about the examples provided and how they'll begin to design their compositions with written and or visual brainstorming. Thumbnail sketches and compositional experimentation with the goal of problem solving the best ways to tell their story. And a lot of artists don't comp out or work through compositional studies. They just jump right in, and there's benefits to doing that. But on this assignment, I think it definitely is beneficial to students to really think that through and figure out what that storytelling element's going to look like. And so that's kind of broken down where they can create a series of smaller thumbnails and then work into, you know, a more complete or finished composition before getting started on their larger piece. And at this point, you definitely want to consider with your students, you know, point of view. Where do they want to go with that? Do they want to create their image and tell their story through the eyes of the unsung hero, or do they want to tell the story through the eyes of somebody who's benefiting from their actions, you know, and or you know, maybe they want to do this in a completely abstract way. Maybe they want it to be some kind of installation that's interacting with a space. Maybe they want to get really conceptual with, you know, the materials they're using and how those materials connect back to the unsung hero story. I think there's just so many ways that we can grow as far as those stories that are being told. And I'm super excited. Next slide. So we're gonna, looking at our time, we're gonna do a real quick activity. So I think sometimes coming up with ideas can be kind of heavy. So if you have another piece of paper and a pencil, we're gonna have a real quick competition. And we're gonna give you about 2 minutes and draw out circles about the size of a quarter in your sketchbook or on your piece of paper. Draw maybe like 15 of those. And then you're going to have 2 minutes to create as many original, and they have to be different, designs in each circle. And then in response to the second key step in the Unsung Heroes diagram, the problem, you know, that we went through, we're going to do this with conflict. So you have to use line, and the line has to be attached to the idea of conflict. So think about how you can use your marks to do that. So 2 minutes, see if you can get all 15 in 15 minutes. These don't have to be objective. They can be completely non-objective or abstract. So I'll let you go. So each circle that you create a design in, you want it to seem or feel conflicted by how you're using a line. I know for me, when I'm comping workout or trying to create rough drafts or thumbnails for a work of art, sometimes I have to remind myself just to like loosen up. And I'm sure students oftentimes feel that way too.
So the best way to get a good idea is to get a lot of ideas.
Yeah, you know, and that's what I like about just how yeah, there's no bad ideas at this point when you're comping or working in your sketchbook. You know, anything obviously can come out. Okay, I can give you about 10 more seconds. We're going to cut this one a little bit short so we can maybe catch up on time a little bit. All right, go ahead and stop. Did anybody get all 15? That was pretty short. Gave you about 70 or 80 seconds, but all right. I can't actually see everybody right now, so I'm asking kind of a blanket question there, but hopefully, yeah.
I think you're in the small view, but if anyone wants to share, go ahead and hold that up, or you know how to attach it to the chat.
All right. All right. Those are awesome. Okay. And, you know, and the next slide is a resource, so you can print that off and, you know, hand that out if you need to your students. All right. Step 6 is an opportunity to just discuss with students the materials that you're going to be using on the project. There's a whole variety of materials that you can use. Next slide. And on that list, lots of 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional. Pretty much if the kids can make it, it can be entered. I think with maybe the exception of animation, maybe, Tony, at this point. Is that right? Or yeah. Next slide. So 7.5 has access to the rubric, or gives students access to the rubric, and you can print that off as a resource on the next slide, but kind of broken down into a 40-40-20 split. So their creative interpretation is 40% of the overall score in the competition, aesthetic value 40, and then the impact paper is 20. Again, one of those resources that's available for you. And then finally, in step 8, the students are making their art. And in this step, students need to definitely invest a significant amount of time to create it. This graphic emphasizes rather just the need to create synthesis between, the materials and processes they use, the impact statement that they write in the next step, and then just their visual interpretation of the Unsung Heroes story. And so, and for me, this is, if I'm sure several of you probably teach AP, where all those things kind of coming together, and for the students to kind of try to be mindful of how those can feed off of each other. And next slide. So kind of like we discussed earlier, providing that opportunity for the students to be a storyteller and to share their work, but also to let their peers be a storyteller by how they interpret the others' work is really, really important. And, this can be, when we piloted the competition back in 2014, we actually had an artifact, well, it wasn't the artifact then, but we had a community Unsung Hero show kind of on our first Friday art walk in our community. And it was received very well. I mean, for people to come in and be able to read their statements and interact with their work. Next slide. This is, as far as like critiquing work, this is something I love to do, is to start off critiques for the first time with students and, emphasize that we all look at and we experience and appreciate artwork in different ways. And so on this one, I'll ask the students, are you an emotionalist? Do you appreciate emotion in a work and the message that it shares? Or are you a realist? Are you most impressed and interested in the realistic qualities communicated in traditional art making? Or are you a formalist? Are you somebody who, the art and design principles, use of materials, have to work out really well before you even really have an entry point where you can appreciate something? So if you want to take a second on that next slide, what I'll do in a classroom setting is explain those, and then I'll have students go stand in the corners. But if in the chat, if you wouldn't mind just putting in, are you an emotionalist, a realist, a formalist? Are you a mixture? And I know for me personally, I'm a formalist. Like if I feel like if the materials or the like if haven't been handled super well, sometimes I have a hard time even getting to the emotional part of it for me. And that's fascinating for me when you have that conversation with students and then they go stand in different corners and you get a quick glimpse into kind of what they appreciate. And awesome seeing those come through. All right, next slide. And then this is called a tag method. This is something that I didn't learn about maybe until a year or two ago, but I use it all the time now in critiques, where when we're partnered up, as we're going around the room, I'll have a student, tell something that they like specifically about a piece of art after they've heard the artist talk about it, and then they ask a question to the artist, and then they give a suggestion. And yeah, hopefully this is on your radar. If it's not, this could be a great takeaway from tonight, and you can use it in other areas too. But I love it. really kind of makes me as a teacher talk a lot less and listen to them. All right, next slide. Extension 2, this provides with a written resource that you can print off to do a written critique if you'd prefer to do that based on the size of your class and such. So in the next slide, this is like a multi-page resource where you can print it off, and students, depending on no matter how big your class is or how much time you have, this can easily be adaptable for any of those things. And students rotate around, spend maybe 8 to 10 minutes on each piece of art, and they read the statement by the artist, give feedback, cool and warm. I don't do this as often, but I love it when I do. Okay, next slide. And then finally, just step 10 is students wrapping up their project by writing their impact statement in 500 to 1,000 words. There's 4 specific components to that they'll want to focus in on. And then in the next slide, this is a resource that I've used in the past where I just have the students, you can print this off, gives them the questions they need to answer, and they can do a hard copy, and then later translate this into their digital document that they'll submit. Okay. Next slide is just the, again, final extension activity. If you have a lower age group of students you're working with or elementary, this could be a resource, The Hero Within, book written by Michael Barrett. All right, next slide. The lesson plan connects to Common Core standards for ELA. Next slide, history and social studies, and then obviously the National Visual Art Standards. So, all right. Next slide is just Q&A. If anyone has any thoughts or questions.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Brad. We have a few minutes for some Q&A. We have about maybe like 2 or 3 minutes. Anyone want to ask any questions? There's so much in this lesson plan that Brad has put together. We could spend an hour going through this, another hour going through this. So while we have Brad here, please feel free, if you have any questions, immediate questions, to just go ahead and unmute yourself. Oh, Mimi, I see your hand is raised. Would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. This is really wonderful. The question I have is, earlier when we were doing that exercise with the visualization, and there was a series of questions. My question is, do you ever ask the students to like what the story could be? Like, do you ever have them like sort of write it out, or like even verbally sort of imagine what formally that story could be?
Oh, I love that idea, Mimi. I don't know that I've done that, and I love that idea. When I was kind of creating the lesson plan on that step, I was talking to my wife Candace about it, and one of her ideas was, instead of like describing it kind of like the way I did, you could have your students like tell it like it's a story. And I really liked her idea, and I think it would create more interpretation, which is maybe kind of the opposite of what you said, but I love that idea, Mimi.
Great.
I have a question. Is it okay, Tony?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, great. Awesome. Good evening, everyone. Brad, again, thanks a lot for all of the information. The question that I have is, how or in what way do you recommend that we, I guess, present a hook for our students? Because like our kiddos are overstimulated with so much classes, their core classes and different things. Like, how can we like organically get their buy-in when it comes to like this, right? Like what strategies do you recommend that we use to like, grab our kiddos' attention, to deep dive into all the fun?
Yeah. I think for me, I don't know if it's a strategy, but I just like the idea of vulnerability, being vulnerable. And so I feel like as a teacher, I'm a storyteller, like in the classroom, or I try to be. So, but I feel like vulnerability is opens doors as far as kind of everybody letting their guards down. So, but I think when we piloted the competition, I started off just having them, think about can you think of a time when you had an opportunity, again, to either make a difference in somebody's life, or you chose not to, and then I would tell them a story. And again, that's kind of how I used vulnerability at the time to kind of open those doors. But yeah.
Great.
Thank
We have a
you. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. And we have another question for Leslie. Maybe we can fit one more in from Leslie.
Perfect. So Brad, I know you teach art classes. I'm a social studies teacher, and I'm curious if you ever have kids that just don't have any confidence. So we did a lesson yesterday looking at kind of like the stories about Harriet Tubman that they didn't know. And then they were going to like create an art piece using these other pieces we had looked at to kind of modify and tell that story. And I had like 2 ready to rock and roll, and the others are like, yeah, I can't draw. I like have no ideas, and we kind of walk through symbols and try to get them going. Is there anything you do when you have that situation with some of yours?
That's a good question. I mean, I think it's about, just encouragement and trying to meet them where they're at, because I mean, art differentiates itself pretty well, pretty easily in a lot of ways. But yeah, I think just, and letting them know, hey, we're all at different levels, and we can approach that in different ways. But I think just trying to encourage them. Yeah, I don't know if that's the best answer on that. I'm sorry, but one other thing on that too. I think as a teacher, just, what is your goal? Like, what do you want to get out of it? What do you want your kids to get out of it? And sometimes I think, maybe they're not going to even get to a point where they want to enter the competition. Maybe you just really want them to walk away with, those stories and wanting to be a better person, and maybe you'll have students kind of do both. But
That's such a lovely thought. So this is a nice thought to end on, Brad, because just to be mindful of time, I want to thank you tremendously for this amazing lesson plan. I think we can all recognize the strength of all of the resources that you've put in there. There's a lot to unpack. There's a lot to work with. I especially like how you guided us through the process and you broke that down. And I think we can all spend some time with all of the various strategies that you gave us, and starting with the describing and careful looking as the beginning of telling a story. And we don't have a lot of time, but I'll just say quickly, like the average person spends only 30 seconds looking at a work of art in an art museum. So can you imagine like going to the Louvre and then like spending like trekking all the way to Paris to spend 30 seconds in front of the Mona Lisa? But anyway, you've slowed us down a bit in terms of looking and describing, and also critiquing, which is another way that we can begin to understand by looking and analyzing artworks, how students can create better artwork. So thank you for these amazing resources. I want to encourage everyone to keep the conversation going on Facebook. You're all invited to join. I know many of our ambassadors on the call are already on our ARTEFFECT Art Educators Facebook group, but we can keep the conversations going there and hear back. And again, thank you, Brad. And I just want to wrap up with some housekeeping. In the next slide, for those of you that are new, you have heard about the competition. If you have students that are ready and interested, the competition is now open. We're accepting submissions through May 1st. There's a poster that you can download. Katie's posting the link in the chat for a classroom poster and a $6,000 grand prize, the opportunity to exhibit at the Milken Center for the Advancing the American Dream, and all good excitement here. And on the next slide, the steps to participate, or just get to the page on the website. But Brad has given us so many resources to be able to choose that unsung hero, to work through the impact statement, work through the creating process of interpreting the unsung hero story and submitting it through the online portal. And I want to emphasize the resources that Brad has given for creating an impact statement and really guiding us through how to even begin that sort of written part of the component. So thank you again for that, Brad. And I think this is, on the next slide, one more slide, I want to remind everyone about the upcoming sessions. You'll all be receiving a follow-up to this call with the resources. So you'll receive a recording, the lesson plan, and you'll be on receiving announcements about these upcoming sessions. But we have an open house in January about the competition, a session coming up with Unsung Heroes in STEAM, and then a session on remembering the Holocaust in January and February. So we will look forward to seeing you there. And I think that is it. Oh, we have certificate of participation. Katie, thank you for posting that in the chat. If you'd like to download that for your reference for 75 minutes of PD time, and the link for future online sessions. So we're just right on time at 5:15. I want to thank our presenter again, Brad LeDuc, for generously sharing all of this and his email. Thank you all for coming, for all of your participation. And we're going to unmute, and we can all say a collective goodbye and a sign off. So thank you, and happy holidays if we don't see you again in person.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. So
Happy
much.
holidays.
Good night.
Appreciate
it. Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you.